But secondly, when you and I save more, we save more green pieces of paper in the bank. What that really means is this: you and I have gotten our paychecks. Our paychecks entitle us to go into the economy and grab all the resources those paychecks will buy. But if we save some of that paycheck, that means we have not gone back into the economy and grabbed all the stuff we're entitled to. We've left some of it out there. And those are precisely the resources that are now available for businessmen to use to invest in their projects. So again, we coordinate investment and saving. Investors invest in projects at a time when there's enough saved stuff to complete them. Now let's suppose you have Alan Greenspan or Ben Bernanke, the current Fed chairman. Let's suppose we have these people in the picture and they start interfering with interest rates. The central bank has the power to do that. It does not matter right now technically how it does it. But the central bank can influence interest rates downwards. The Fed can do that. So let's suppose they do that. Well, what we've seen is that if interest rates come down because you and I saved more, the interest rate plays its normal, natural coordinating function. But if interest rates come down just because some guy wants them to go down, it doesn't perform those functions. If you tamper with the interest rate that the free market wants to set, you now, instead of having coordination, you have a mismatch. Because for one thing, if interest rates come down not because we've saved more, but just because some guy pushes them down, well, we're not necessarily going to hold off on consuming until the future. That doesn't mean we're still consuming in our old pattern. It's unchanged. But yet, businessmen are misled into thinking now's the time to invest for the future. But it isn't. In this case, people are still consuming in their old pattern. Why would it matter to them what Alan Greenspan is doing? They're still consuming the way they were before, maybe even more. So there's a time mismatch when the central bank interferes in the free market. People want to consume now. Businessmen are engaged in research and development, long-term product development of new products, or long-term projects. There's a time mismatch. So a lot of what businessmen are doing is not going to turn out to be profitable. But secondly, if the interest rate comes down just because somebody's fiddling with it, we haven't saved any actual physical stuff. There isn't any more steel in the economy, or lumber, or breakfast cereal, or whatever. There isn't any new stuff. But meanwhile, businessmen see the low interest rates, so they think now's the time to invest in long-term projects. But there aren't enough physical resources to complete all those projects. So they're not going to bear fruit. A lot of them are going to go bust. And if this is not clear, I'll give you the great clarifying analogy that Ludwig von Mises gave, the great economist of the 20th century. Mises said, think of it this way. Imagine the economy is like a master builder building a house. However, the master builder thinks he has 20% more bricks than he actually has. Now think what's going to happen. If you were the master builder, you'd build in different dimensions than you would if you knew the real supply of bricks. So the longer the master builder continues building this house, the worse it's going to be for him. Because as soon as he figures out the real supply, and let's say for the sake of argument he can't buy any more bricks, he's going to realize he wasted all his time. He wasted all these bricks, he wasted his labor time, he's going to have to wreck this whole half-finished house. So in effect, that's what's happening when the central bank forces interest rates down. That's a one individual example of it, but imagine an economy filled with investors, all of whom are engaging in projects that there aren't enough physical resources to complete. Now, what is the best outcome for that master builder? Is it better for him to discover his error sooner or later? Well, obviously, the sooner he finds out, the better he is. I mean, yeah, maybe he's already laid 2 rows of bricks, but at least that's all he's done. And then he can save the rest and build a different kind of house. But if we wait until he gets to the very last brick, and then we say, oh, by the way, that was the last brick. Well, and the poor guy has wasted all this time. He's wasted all his bricks. But that's what people are saying. Every time they say, well, we're in an economic downturn, then the Fed needs to lower interest rates even more. Well, what you're actually saying is, the best thing for our master builder is not to stop him from building this unbuildable house, but just get him drunk, so he doesn't notice how many bricks he's got left. Just keep him building and building and building. Well, does that prevent the bust from coming? The house is unbuildable no matter how drunk the guy is. These investment projects in the economy are unfinishable, at least all of them are anyway, given the level of resources we have. So all you're doing by saying, oh, let's lend more, let's pump more money in, let's force those interest rates down lower, you're just going to make the bust worse. Because people are going to continue down paths that they shouldn't even be continuing down. Now, one of the beauties of that master builder example is that it reveals for us what the recession or depression period really is. And this will be probably the hardest point for people to accept. But it actually shows us that the recession or depression is not the bad thing. The recession is the period in which the builder, in our example, says, whoa, 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 I can't finish this house. I better abandon this project and do something else. That's good, because as long as he continues that project, he's making everybody poorer, because he's diverting bricks to an unfinishable project. So we're all the poorer by all those resources. We're all the poorer by all the things his workers could have been working on if they hadn't been working on an unbuildable house. So the recession is the cure. It's the economy's way of saying, screw you, you crummy central bank. We're going to try to sort out which of these projects should be allowed to continue and which are just phony baloney projects that are only going because of the artificially low interest rates. So the recession is the cleansing period. Now, I know we're inclined to think, no, the recession isn't good. The good part was, when everybody was working and everything was going well. Well, again, think of the master builder. When he was building that house, hey, that looked like prosperity, right? He's working. He's putting resources to use. Looks great. But if you're working on a job that makes society poorer, that's bad. So if the prosperity is phony and it consists of unfinishable investment projects, it's bad to let that continue. We want that to stop so that we stop impoverishing ourselves, we stop wasting resources, and we start up a real, genuine prosperity. Now, we've just lived through a classic example of this. And by the way, this answers the question, why do the best businessmen, why is everybody making errors all at the same time? Because they're all misled by the interest rates. The whole structure of interest rates is fiddled with by the central bank. Interest rates have an influence throughout the whole economy. They influence everybody's decisions. So you get errors being made by businessmen, investors, and consumers alike. That's the problem. The Fed is causing this problem. Now, we've just lived through an example of what happens when you try to solve the master builder's dilemma by just liquoring him up. Because in effect, by analogy, that's what Alan Greenspan did in 2001. Alan Greenspan in 2001 was getting a little impatient with the economy, and especially in the wake of 9/11, he wanted to do something. So we started cutting interest rates, again, forcing interest rates artificially low. As we've seen, artificially making interest rates lower doesn't make your society wealthier. It just makes your society do stupid things. If this really were a shortcut to prosperity, then Bangladesh would just open a Federal Reserve, lower their interest rates, and they'd be rich. So obviously this can't work. But so what Alan Greenspan did was, he decided, well, we're just going to get interest rates super, super low. From 2003 to 2004, he pushed the so-called federal funds rate, which is a bellwether interest rate, down to 1% and held it there for a year. So he encouraged, exactly what we've seen. We encouraged this crazy housing boom, where builders are building houses there aren't going to be occupants for. There isn't enough consumer demand for that many $900,000 houses. You're doing crazy projects that aren't going to bear fruit. So he gets this going. But what's interesting is, in 2001, the economy was still coming down from the internet bust, when all those internet companies all went down at the same time. Another Fed instituted problem. And Greenspan basically said, you know what, I don't want any more recession. Let's just pump more money in. And so notice what happened in 2001, because Alan Greenspan did not let that recession take its course so that all the stupid investments could be stopped and we could get our economy on a real rather than a phony foundation. Because he refused to let that happen, look at what the result was. That was the first recession on record in which housing starts did not decline. So people drew the false conclusion that, well, no matter what happens to the economy, housing is always robust. A house is the best investment you can make. Housing prices never go down. You should flip houses and you could make a fortune.